Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. The last 20 years have witnessed a revolution in manufacturing. Goods are no longer made in Chile or Canada, they're made in the world. And these global supply and production chains enable companies to produce goods more efficiently and at lower cost. But not all regions of the world are able to participate in these global value chains due largely to inadequate infrastructure. So the question today is, how can aid for trade programs improve infrastructure and perhaps know-how and other forms of capacity so that these developing countries can participate effectively in global value chains? We're very fortunate to have with us today officials from two of the world's best-known companies, Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, the chairman of Nestlé, and Sarah Thorn, the Senior Director of Government Relations at Wal-Mart. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Sarah, let's start with you. How can aid for trade help?
Well, I think for Wal-Mart, as we've moved into emerging markets, we've certainly realized that we want healthy communities in those markets. Those are our future customers. And many ways, doing business within those markets is capacity building. Let me give you an example. Outside the United States, Wal-Mart is primarily a grocer. 50% of our sales come from food. And so it's important for us to have a secure supply of food products. And in many emerging markets, the agricultural sector isn't very well organized. And so what we've figured out is it's probably better for us, instead of going through middlemen, to go direct to the farmer, to contract directly with farmers, to give them both the market intelligence, what do people want to buy, but also the best agricultural practices, what is the packaging, what are the standards, so that we can sell those products in our markets. I think in the past we'd call that business, but we've recognized it's also development, and that in helping the farmers earn a better return and helping our customers get a better product, we can actually help build value chains. And the most interesting thing that we've seen in Central America is, at first the farmers want know-how and market intelligence. What are people going to buy? How do I produce it? And then over time, what they want is capital. They want to invest and they want to vertically integrate so that they can not only just sell to our stores locally, but sell globally. And for me, that's really capacity building. And it's powered by a larger company, but it's that wonderful intersection between big and small. And what we've also found is there's enormous opportunities for leverage. So last fall, we signed a memorandum of understanding with USAID, the Agency for International Development. And we recognized that we probably didn't need to put more value chain programs into the system. That what we needed to do was put the market, Wal-Mart's market, into those value chain programs by saying, if you're helping farmers development, and a lot of aid money goes towards development, make sure it's linked to the market so that you get a sustainable program. And therefore, we can really leverage all of the work that's going on. And we're doing similar mapping with a lot of other international development agencies so that we can make those development dollars go further.
Peter, what's been Nestlé's experience?
Well, let me perhaps first of all make a step back, because I think the question you were asking us is not so much what we individually doing. You were asking us much more what the country should be doing and whether there are new opportunities for them. Now, I think aid for trade is, for me, from a pragmatic point of view, the most important thing the country should embrace. Because, even if we had the Doha round successfully, it is useless to put free trade agreements up if afterwards the countries and the companies who are working in those countries cannot take advantage of them. So I think from a business point of view that I think this aid for trade is so important. And within this aid for trade, of course, you have aspects like infrastructure, capacity building, and all of those things we're talking about. And I thought Sarah's remark about that you have to concentrate at your consumer at the end of the day. Now, in the case of Wal-Mart and in our case of Nestlé, of course, we're talking about the consumer. But if you are in a different industry, for example, in investment industries, well, your consumer might be another industry in a more developed market. And what does this industry really need, and how are you facilitating to participate with them? So my feeling is that if I look at the whole catalog that is available for those countries and the efforts that Aid for Trade is making, I think the first thing I would be doing is to support perhaps Rob Selig's initiative about open dialogue, about open knowledge and open solutions. Because instead of reworking for every single country, developing country, new ideas, let's have one of those successful ideas, how this knowledge base has been created in these developing countries, how solutions have been found. Let's have this in an open dialogue so that people can refer to them, back to them. Now, within this framework, Nestlé has been participating since 1920. We established our first milk district 1920 in Brazil. We are in Africa since 1927, so we have been long a part of this effort over those things. Today we are working with 600,000 farmers individually. We are helping, for example, in the milk farmers in order to diminish the spoil, which is huge. Pakistan, it's up to 24%. We have brought it down in our milk district of 0.5%. In the coffee area, we have been able to pay our coffee farmers 25 to 30% more because of the quality that we're using in espresso. So we do quite a lot of those things. But I think one of the perhaps most interesting that also private companies can do is not only to help them, but to help them to do the right thing. And I give you one example. I'm just coming back. Last Friday I was in Africa, and I was visiting in Ghana maize farmers. Maize farmers, the 20,000 farmers we were working, we had a rejection rate of almost 30% of their farming because of aflatoxin. But the worst thing is, not only did the farmer didn't get money for this, almost 30%, the worst thing is that he used the rejected corn to feed his family. Poisoning basically his family because of ignorance, because of not knowing. Well, we established school farms out there, farm schools are really around, and today the rejection rate is not even 1%, and not one pet corn is given to the children like it was before. So I think to find out what are the real subjects. It is not GMO, for example, it has not killed anybody, as we know very well, okay? But aflatoxin is. So I think as private enterprises, based on scientific evidence, I think we can help many of those countries within the framework that I pointed out to put the right priorities.
This is very interesting what you've said there, Peter. Today, Director General Lamy said that among the things that needs to be done to improve the Aid for Trade program is to better involve the private sector to pick up on some of these best practices ideas that you mentioned. What are your thoughts on that, Sarah?
I absolutely think it's important because, especially if you're looking at private sector development, if that's the goal of Aid for Trade facilitation, so companies around the world can participate in the global trading system. And we've seen through our experience, whether it's farmers or small suppliers, the things that the suppliers need to compete are largely intelligence. They need to know what standards do you need. We work with a small pickle company in India, women-owned pickle company, and they had a great product, but every time they took the product to market, it was in a packaging in a glass that the glass is shattered. And they weren't using stainless steel equipment, so they weren't ISO certified. And the standards we use in India are going to be the standards that we use anywhere in the world. So we worked with that supplier and got them to be able to sell to us in India, and now they can sell anywhere because they have the right standards. They know what is necessary to sell in the modern world. And I think that kind of intelligence and linking the private sector in is critical to make this work. I think the other thing that we've seen over the past several years is this move away from incorporations from philanthropy-based giving, that we're just going to give money and it's going to be not at all related to our business, and that's the way we're going to do philanthropy. I've seen so much more, especially in the consumer products and the retail industry, where we're using our philanthropy dollars sort of as the capital to create the investment, to leverage what's going on out there, to make sure that we can be making it tied to business and growing businesses and growing communities together. But I do think it's important to engage the private sector, because sometimes you see these development projects that end when the money ends, and that's just not what you want. You want to create sustainable, scalable change.
It's interesting because if you look at the Aid for Trade numbers, the vast majority of these funds go to infrastructure or enhancing productive capacity, the kinds of things that you've been talking about are more best practices, know-how, which don't necessarily cost that much in terms of the return they can provide. Isn't that true, Peter?
No, I think if you look at corporate social responsibility, the concept, which started with philanthropy, but I think it has evolved over the last couple of years. And together with Michael Porter, we have created a new level of corporate social responsibility, which we're calling creating shared value. And it really comes back to the recognition that in order to be successful in the business, you have to create long-term value both for your shareholders and for the society, which gives you a license to act. You know, this shareholder value concept, which was so one-sided and so short-term oriented, it is just not the way how you can run a company in the long term. And by creating shared value, by in every decision you make, by incorporating the corporate social responsibility in your main strategic thinking and decision making, like Sarah was saying, by taking care that the standards which we apply in the countries are the same one that being applied at home, which immediately has an impact that you elevate the standards and you make them and allow those people then to be part of a global supply chain. I mean, those simple things, I think, are the most crucial one, and they are much more valid than just a philanthropic edge to give another $1 million or $2 million to somebody who, anyway, you don't know what's going to happen with it. So I think creating shared value, where you really help and bring values for the society you're in, I think that's a much better concept.
Sarah Thorn, your final thoughts.
Well, I don't want to dismiss infrastructure because, of course, it's important. If you can't move product, you can't trade. But I would also say that this concept of shared value it can be applied equally to infrastructure. You've got companies like FedEx and UPS that are working with customs agencies around the world to help them automate, help them become better at moving product. Because for us, every day that something sits, it's just a huge cost. And if it's a cost to us, it's a cost to a smaller manufacturer. But I think the idea of integrating and looking for opportunities within the private sector in whatever area you're looking at, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's farmers, whether it's small businesses, and saying, is there a way to leverage? Is there a way to leverage this money that's going to aid for trade facilitation by engaging the private sector? I think that's a really useful concept. The other thing that has always struck me when we talk about this is that we're all doing such good work in the private sector, but we're not linking it very well across the value chain. So you may be working with cocoa farmers and Wal-Mart may be working with cocoa farmers, but we're not sharing across the value chain what we're doing, the best practices we've learned, and how we can link them together to make a better result in the end. And I think that could be a really interesting role for the WTO to look at.
Peter, you have the last word.
Well, I fully agree with Sarah in the sense that, of course, by creating and by working together, but I think even more importantly is that we are working together with the government. Because I'm absolutely convinced that it cannot be and shouldn't be the responsibility of private enterprise to establish policies which belong to government. What we can do and what we should be doing is that we put to their service our know-how, our technology that we have, to work together with them in order to support them. But the responsibility, the prime responsibility for me, should always stay in government. Take the example of water. I mean, if we have one resource which is running out very, very rapidly, it's water. And we have established, together with the World Economic Forum, the Water Resource Group, we are working very, very strongly to help governments in order to establish long-term sustainable water plans. But also there, I have put it as a principle that it will never be even a public-private partnership which should be responsible of establishing the final plan for government. It is always to be the government, and we can support them and help them and be at their service. That's basically, I think, very important. Because if private enterprises tries to substitute government, I think this is always short-lived and will never be well implemented.
Peter Brabeck-Letmathe, Sarah Thorn, thanks to both of you for being with us, and thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.